All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the CAMI, the Culture of Academic Medicine Initiative, third session that we're doing as part of the Wellbeing Matters series. So today's session is against the current strategies for wellbeing advocacy amid institutional and governmental pressures. So I'm Sean Sullivan. I'm a family doctor and the co-chair of the Scientific Planning Committee for this series. Unfortunately, our usual moderator, Victor Doe, could not be here today. He's traveling, but I'll try to do his role justice. And thank you, everyone, for being here. We're very excited. We have some great speakers today, and we'll get to them with just a little bit of housekeeping. So we'll get into that right now. So first for a land acknowledgement. So the AFMC, who's hosting this session, is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Myself, I'm just outside of Sudbury on the land of the Atikameksheng, Anishinaabeg, and Wanapitei First Nations. And all of you, wherever you are in Canada, are on traditional lands. Our topics today are on advocacy and the impact of systems. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us to reflect on how we can advocate and sort of act on the calls to action related to healthcare and medical education. So thank you for joining today. In terms of housekeeping, this session is being recorded so that people who couldn't make it today can watch it. All participants are automatically muted and your videos are turned off until the question and answer period to avoid background distractions. We encourage you to submit your questions. So at the end, we'll have a question and answer period. And you can submit either through the question and answer function in Zoom. So you can access that usually at the bottom of your screen. And if you don't see it, you can click more. You can also use the raise hand feature at the time of the question and answer to be unmuted and ask your question. And we ask that everyone please contribute to the discussions thoughtfully, ensuring a positive and supportive space for all of our participants. Our hope is that everyone leaves today inspired and ready to do the work that you do. We are using a software system called Wordly for accessibility. So it allows for audio interpretation, both in French and a number of other languages. And there's also the ability for subtitles and captions today. So you can access this through scanning the QR code. And I believe there'll also be a link in the chat. So if you're interested in using that, please go ahead. Our Scientific Planning Committee for accreditation, we have our affiliations and financial support here. There's no concerns that we came across for this session. And in terms of finances, this session is funded through the Canadian Medical Association, MD Financial Management, as well as Scotiabank, who've provided funding to the Culture of Academic Medicine Initiative, which lets us do this seminar series as well as the other work that we do. So we thank them for their support. So today for our panel, we're privileged to have two wonderful guests who have a lot of background when it comes to advocacy and the systems that we live and work in. So in order on the slide, we have Dr. Stan Kuchar. Dr. Kuchar is a senator appointed to the Senate of Canada in 2018. He's a professor emeritus at Dalhousie University. He's a national and international leader in youth mental health. And he's also led the development of Canada's National Youth Mental Health Framework, Evergreen. Dr. Joss Reimer is the past president of the CMA, the Canadian Medical Association, and the chief medical officer for the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. She's a public health physician who has led major initiatives in health communication, health equity, and immunization, including serving as the medical lead and spokesperson for Manitoba's COVID-19 vaccine task force. She practices maternity care and holds a Master of Public Health focused on health administration. And notably, as of April 1st, is Canada's new Chief Public Health Officer. So congratulations, Dr. Reimer. And thank you to both of you for joining us today. We're very glad that you're taking part. Now, for accreditation, we'll just go to each of the speakers and ask them to disclose their disclosures, and then we'll get into the session. Thank you. So we'll start with Dr. Kuchar.
Sure, thanks so much. I'm an advisory board member for the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, and I'm a professor emeritus, sadly unpaid position at Dalhousie University.
All right,
And
thank you.
financial support, I want to thank you and your taxpayers' dollars for paying my salary.
Happy to contribute. And Dr. Reimer?
Yeah, so I am paid by the CMA. I have a retainer fee from the CMA for my past president role. I'm also paid as an employee of the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, and I teach the alarm course. So I get a stipend for teaching that with the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, as well as being part of a few research studies that have obtained grants from the CIHR.
Excellent, thank you. So how today's session is going to work, so we're doing the introductions now, and then we're going to have a discussion with our presenters. Then we'll have a question and answer period where you can ask questions that come to mind, and then we'll conclude and talk about next steps. In terms of our learning objectives for today, we're hoping that by attending, you'll be able to analyze how systemic decisions impact physician and patient well-being, evaluate advocacy approaches that could be suitable to one's role and context, and applying practical skills such as articulating concerns and setting boundaries to drive change. So without further ado, we'll get into our discussion. It's a big topic, but we have some experts here with us today. So why don't we start off with Dr. Kuchar, Senator Kuchar, if you don't mind, you had some thoughts you wanted to share.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much for that kind introduction, and to Cami and AFMC for putting this series on and for inviting me to participate. And before starting on anything, I just want to congratulate Dr. Reimer on her new appointment, Canada's Chief Medical Officer. It's a position in which you can make a great impact on the health and well-being of Canadians. And I know you, and if you're successful, then Canada is going to be successful. So congratulations again, and let's talk, because I know where the skeletons are. So I'm one of 5 physicians in the Senate. And we're all independent senators. That means we don't belong to any political party, and we don't carry a banner for any party. And although we sit in 2 different groups, because we have organized ourselves into groups, they're not parties, we work very closely together to collaborate on all things that are health related in the Senate. I'm going to start with giving some background so you'll see where my biases come from. We all have biases. I would like to make mine manifest. My 2 most consuming health-related files currently have been improving access for internationally trained physicians, routes to licensure, primary practice-ready assessments, and substantially increasing research funding to the Tri-Councils and to the CIHR for discovery-based health research. I have failed miserably on both parts of 6 years of pushing up the hill. And that is one of the lessons that I want you all to remember, is that if you feel like Sisyphus when you're trying to make change institutionally or organizationally or policy-wise, you're in good company. The strategy that I'm going to come to really is, how do you engage the political system? And in order to help you understand a little bit about that at the federal level, most people have a good idea of how the House of Commons works, but very few Canadians actually have a really good idea of how the Senate works. And I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. The Senate is independent, and that's since 2016. The political party system that used to characterize the Senate is no longer. So the previous prime minister got rid of the political party system in the Senate. In order to understand the Senate, you need to understand what a democracy is. A democracy is not just about people voting for a government. It actually requires stable institutions that can protect the people from their government. Really, really important distinction. And this works best when the institutions that are designed to do so are not captured by the political party process. And you can see what happens when a political party process captures those institutions by watching what's happening to our neighbors in the South. So, because Trump runs the Republican Party as his private fiefdom, and their House and Chamber are both party driven, the institutions that are designed to protect democracy have been brought together to attack democracy. So we have to be really careful. In Canada, we have the three institutions, which are the House of Commons, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. Each of them have their pros and cons, but each are essential to be independent of each other. And each can work to balance each other off against for the protection of democracy. And we do that through ensuring that the constitution of the country is made available for everybody in the country. The Senate was created to counter the specter of majority. It's hard to say, majorityism. Okay. Just because the majority think that something is right, it doesn't mean that it actually is right. It's also designed to help protect the rights of the vulnerable people. And if anyone's been following Bill C-12, that's a really good example of that. Because the Senate is not governed by political parties, it makes it much more difficult for the government to get their legislation through the Senate. And that's a good thing. So if we look at the role of the Senate, we can either pass legislation without making any changes to it. We can get rid of legislation that can cause a constitutional crisis, or we can amend it to try to make it better, to try to improve it. And if you look at the history of Canada, the number of government bills that have been amended historically is about 4%. So you can see the party system at play. In the new Senate, since 2016, the number of bills is almost a third. Well, that's a humongous difference. And it's in the amendment of the legislation and changing how legislation works. So because senators are appointed for long periods of time, and because we are not the people that are elected on cycles, we can stay with the topic across governments or across prorogations. And so engaging the Senate is a really useful way of dealing with anything that you have to do politically. So back to the topic of full disclosure, I need people to know that I actually was part of the leadership of PARO, Professional Association of Interns and Residents of Ontario, that initiated and successfully conducted the Interns and Residents strike of 1980. And I was the strike coordinator, and we went on strike to improve working conditions for interns and residents. Some of you may know people of the people that where I was working together with on the bargaining team. Dr. Paula Byrne. Those of you who are at McMaster know who Paul is. Bob Howard. Those of you who've been at St. Mike's in Toronto know who Bob was or is. Paul Dorian, cardiologist in Toronto. And we didn't call it wellness then. We called it improving working conditions. And we did a lot on that. On-call schedules, pay went up double. Maternity leave, there was none before that. So those were initial steps in improving the workplace where we as physicians had to be. Now, in preparation for this seminar, I have to actually I needed to understand what physician well-being meant in the context of institutional government pressure. Because one of the things that I've learned from my years in the Senate is that people are coming and seeking political or policy support. We need to know what you're asking for. and you need to be really clear on what you're asking for. It's essential. So I went through understanding what wellness and well-being actually meant. And I got into the 1946 WHO definition of health, which you will remember is a state of complete well-being and emotional, mental, and social well-being, which is not defined. And then the WHO definition of mental health, in which an individual realizes their abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, work, productivity, and make the contribution to the community. And then that was weird, because well-being again wasn't defined. It was a state of well-being. I went to the Centers for Disease Control. Then I got really worried because it defined well-being as the presence of positive emotions and moods, the absence of negative emotions, satisfaction with life, and positive functioning. If anybody thinks that well-being means no negative emotions, then I don't know what planet you're living on. It just is not it. So then I kept going and I checked out wellness, and the CMA website told me that and I quote, wellness can encompass lifestyle and mental and spiritual well-being, and that it was more holistic than the meaning of health. I became really, really worried, because if wellness can encompass well-being, and now we've got a spiritual component, I mean, what does holistic mean? Now the scientist in me is getting concerned. And then I found that there were 8 dimensions of wellness that were meant for my mind, body, and soul. I'm not going to comment on the soul. And that these were physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, vocational, financial, and environmental. And then I turned, in a state of complete confusion, I turned to the Oxford Dictionary, which defined wellness as the state of being in good health. So, Houston, we have a problem. And I was beginning to think that we were emulating the Greeks, the ethical philosophers, in which the good life was considered to be from one of 2 competing perspectives, the hedonic or the Epicurean versus the eudaimoc or the Aristotelian. So hedonic maximized pleasure and life satisfaction while minimizing pain and immediate gratification. And the eudaimoc focus on purpose and action, engage in activities that improve your skills and improve your community. So it's long-term rewards that demand civic participation. The hedonic one is avoid civic participation. You may remember that Epicurus told his followers not to get involved in politics. I also then am very, very well aware of the large and annually increasing wellness industry. And this is something that we as physicians have to be very careful with, because it's estimated to have a net worth of over $6 trillion annually and growing. And it sells its products we don't need for conditions we didn't know we have. And then I studied logic at university, so I was aware of the logical fallacy called the jingle jangle fallacy that makes me wonder whether well-being and wellness were part of that confusion. So then I went to the medical literature and I got even more confused. In a systematic review of over 3,000 papers, Brady et al. Said that only 14% actually defined what they're studying. But that was a study by Brady done in 2018, and Galderas in 2024 actually found out that lots of papers, many more papers, had definitions of well-being, but there were 190 different definitions. So it came to me that what people were doing was constructing these concepts, and they're important concepts, but trying to operationalize them into what we can do about them was a problem. So then I went to AI, of course, and AI told me that well-being is a broad, multidimensional concept without a single accepted definition. Okay. Then I asked AI what an AI-generated wellness was, and was told that wellness involves using AI-driven platforms to give personalized diet, fitness, and lifestyle advice. And then I went to a lot of physician websites and looked at them, and you'll know them all. And it became clear that although there were lots and lots of different components to each of these websites, there was agreement that physician organizations had a responsibility to their members to direct them to health providers when there was a need for both physical and mental health concerns, and that improvements in the workplace were a goal that all were working towards and supporting. So in my political role, I began to think that wellness advocacy, which is the purpose of this webinar, is asking institutions and governments to help. If we ask to make physicians happier, that's a non-starter. That's not going to be the role of the institution or organization. But organizing to lobby institutions and governments to improve workplace conditions is a doable goal and a necessary goal. That's a function that is driven by the same interest that all labor organizations have for their members. So in that way, we're no different than CUPE or the Canadian Labour Congress. In fact, one of my closest friends in the Senate is the previous president of the Canadian Labour Congress. It's amazing how we agree on so many different things, because my role as a physician was improving the workplace for us as physicians. His role as president of the Canadian Labour Congress was working with various unions to improve workplace conditions for their members. So it's a really easy allyship. So in that role, we have to organize and learn how to lobby institutions and governments to actually improve the working conditions in the places that we work. But we also, as physicians, have another role, and that is because of our responsibility to our patients, we have to organize to lobby institutions and governments to improve access to and quality of health care. And that's also a doable goal. Now, for improving workplace conditions, we can learn from labor unions, but we're hampered in this because we're not unionized. And we generally do not see ourselves as employees. We have a very unusual payer discharge relationship. This makes it difficult but not impossible to achieve positive results in this area. But, and here is an important but from my perspective, this is a process that has to be physician-led and physician-delivered. For improvements in access to and quality of healthcare, however, we need to act in allyship with other healthcare providers. We can't be successful in this area by ourselves. And sometimes, and this is important, that the demands that we will make for our own workplace enhancements, improvements, will be in conflict with the demands that other healthcare providers may make. And it also will be an issue that will be in conflict with what governments will look at in terms of cost of the system. Because physician remuneration is a cost that is looked at as a proportion of healthcare spending, for example. So what I think is really necessary to engage the political system, it's really, really necessary to understand what it is that physicians are engaging the system about. Are we engaging the system about improvements to the workplace, which will make our lives better? So that's consistent with a labor model. Or are we engaged in improving access to and quality of healthcare, which has to be done in allyship, and which we sometimes have to remember can be in conflict with what we may be doing in terms of the work we want in the workplace for ourselves. So I thought it would be useful to share those thoughts with you, because I, as a physician and as a person who has some political capacity to nudge the system, I need to know exactly what it is that is being asked of me. I can't make you happier, but I can work to improve the workplace, and I can work to improve access to and quality of care for everybody. So that's the end of my component here. What I'm asking for is clarity of the ask. The dairy farmers are very good at this. When they come, they know exactly what they're asking for. When I talk to physician groups, it's all over the map. So necessary for clarity. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Kuchar. I think that's a great reminder to all of us about creating that clarity. It's hard to get movement if we're not asking for something that's clear and actionable. Often wellness is sort of a general thing, and so really breaking it down to what we're looking for. Um, Dr. Reimer, you have a lot of experience in public health, which has a lot of impact on wellness. What are your thoughts on this topic?
I think it's really interesting to be talking about what do we mean by wellness, because when we talk to physicians, we see that there's a lot of burnout. We have our survey, the National Physician Health Survey, and levels of burnout are quite a bit higher than before the COVID pandemic, although they went down since the last time we did the survey. So there's a little bit of positive in there. But burnout is not just about work hours. It's not just about mood. It really has to do with what you see as the value of your work. Is it meaningful? Do you feel valued? And that's where I think we can put together a really specific ask, because we know that the types of things that make our work more efficient, help us contribute more to the system, are also going to reduce burnout, because physicians will be doing more of the things that they're passionate about. So some of the asks with the CMA that we've been working on is trying to reduce administrative burden. And by doing that, that means things like bringing in AI tools. It means the new S5 bill that's connected care, making sure that our systems talk to each other so we're not constantly repeating tests or trying to look things up or faxing back and forth. It means bringing in team-based care, where we can have not just a physician trying to be everything to everyone, but making sure that we have funding models that help bring in a variety of other healthcare professions. I think of my own previous work in a primary care clinic where we had OT and PT and social work and a pharmacist and a nurse. And it was wonderful for me to be able to see, my pregnant patient who had gestational diabetes, have them go see the dietitian to talk about, diabetes-friendly diets, talk to the pharmacist who could educate them on how to use a glucometer, and then come back and see me so we can go through their numbers and make sure that their medications were appropriate. It was just a really great approach that decreased the pressure on me, allowed me to focus in on what I was best at, and gave better care to patients. So I agree there are going to be times that we're in conflict, but I also think we can find some common asks that benefit other healthcare providers, benefit our patients, and help physicians be healthier. Because we know at the end of the day, we went into this because we care about our communities, we care about patients, we want to make things better, and we want to do it efficiently and not spend the 10.4 hours that we're currently spending per week on administrative tasks. So there's a lot of specifics here that we could go into, a lot of numbers in this survey. I am encouraged to see that burnout has gone down slightly since our last survey, but there's still a lot of work to do. And so I really hope that we can be pushing in the same direction. Some of the things that Senator Kuchar mentioned about the specific ask, that's really important, but also making sure that we're aligning our asks with political wins. We know that when we bring forward ideas and they don't match up with what the Senate's already working on, that don't match up with what a politician's area of interest is, what the minister has been directed to do by the prime minister, that we're much less likely to be successful. And so to be really effective advocates, we need to look for those policy windows. What's in the mandate letter? Is there something I can do to match the ask that I have to the mandate letter that the minister has received? Is there an ongoing study happening in the Senate that we could volunteer to have experts come and testify at, or supply documents and information to help inform the study that the Senate is doing? These are the types of strategic work that are going to be much more effective and move things along, compared to if we just continually push one agenda, and even worse, if it's not a clear agenda, forward over and over again. And so I really want physicians and all healthcare providers to be strategic in how they ask for changes, because I know that we can move the needle. The fact that we have this connected care bill, again, shows me that there are opportunities to move things forward when we do it strategically.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. One of the things I reflect on is, often when we're talking about well-being and changes to the system, as individual physicians or medical educators, we often have that firsthand experience and feel like this needs to change and that'll make the difference. Um, but we're quite far from the decision makers. So I guess first to you, Dr. Reimer, and then to Dr. Kuchar. Um, what do you think are advocacy steps that the average, the people on this call could sort of be involved with or work towards to make change?
I think that's a great question because I often get asked, mostly by medical students and residents, but also by practicing physicians, about advocacy and how to do advocacy. And I have a very broad definition in my mind of what advocacy is, because we tend to think of it as like letter writing campaigns, talking to media, protesting, those types of things. And those are all advocacy and they all have an important role to play. But I also believe that advocacy means taking leadership positions within your organization, being on committees, sitting at the table where decisions are being made and having your voice heard in those settings. I also see advocacy as things like running for political office. I see advocacy as working in the Senate, supporting the work there. And then maybe above all, I see advocacy as advocating on behalf of your individual patients when the system is difficult, which it often is. Um, that advocacy is also critical. And so there's no one right way to do advocacy. Every physician is going to be coming in with a different skill set, a different area that they're passionate about. And so what I want is that we all are advocating to improve the system in the way that makes the most sense to us. So maybe you are the person who needs to speak out publicly, talk to media, be critical. Maybe you're the person who can be really effective inside at that decision-making table, sitting on committees, working your way up through leadership. I don't know the right answer to that. I do know you can't do all of them because once you are sitting inside the circle at the table, it's very challenging to both criticize from the outside and still have access to those decision-making tables. It's not impossible, but very, very tricky. But that's what I want to see from everybody is get involved in whatever way makes sense for you, writing letters, testifying at different in committee hearings, making sure that your whoever the decision makers are in your setting hear from you, or becoming one of those decision makers yourself.
I think, Dr. Reimer, I would agree with everything you said. I just wanted to focus on a couple of those areas. Nobody can do everything. So you have to choose what it is that you're going to do. Secondly, you go much further together than you go alone. And a lot of times physicians are used to doing things on their own. And what I have learned by coming into the Senate is the way that I engaged my daily life had to change dramatically. In my daily life, I had a person who was suffering who came to me because I had a knowledge and I was a socially sanctioned healer. And together we figured out what the challenges were that we were going to deal with, and together we figured out a strategy. We then implemented them, and then we evaluated how we were doing. But that's not how government works. So, it doesn't work like that. Okay, so I found that when I went into the Senate, huge disconnect between what I was used to doing as a physician and what I now had to do as a senator. I had to learn a whole new skill set. So you need to learn the competencies that are dependent on the role that you take. Now that's the first thing. So it may be that the competencies that you have as a physician are not the competencies that are going to take you to where you need to get. And I'm going to look forward to Dr. Reimer doing this in PHAC. Okay, so it's going to be really a challenge. The second thing is looking for your window. And again, I completely agree with Dr. Reimer here, is that you have to be ready that when a window opens, that you can walk through that window. That was a mixed metaphor. I didn't quite get that one right. Well, you know what I mean. So let me just share an example of this. I just happened to be reading the 2014 Auditor General's report. And like, like that's my new life. And in there, the Auditor General of Canada pointed out that we didn't have an antimicrobial resistance strategy. Like, what? So I checked with PHAC, and yeah, we're going to work on it. And that was on 2019. So I got up in the Senate and I got my colleagues and fly through the window. That's it. Thank you. So I got my colleagues together and we started to push on a antimicrobial strategy. So now I hear that PHAC actually has this quote strategy, but it hasn't been run through the processes to make it a policy decision, and it hasn't been implemented. So there is an interesting example of how there was a window that when you realize that there is a window, you get your group together, you get your posse together, and you fly through that window together, and you push where you need to push, and now you're actually watching advocacy happen. Because as I'm telling you this story, the reason I chose that story and not 100 other stories is because Dr. Reimer is now going to be in charge of making that policy happen. So you see how sometimes advocacy can be hitting a person over the head with a stick, but sometimes advocacy can be just as subtle as I've just demonstrated to you. So this is key. The second thing is that advocacy happens over a long period of time. And it happens through networks. So if you can't do effective advocacy if you're only there for a short time. It's not a one-night stand, it's a marriage. And you're going to, just like with a marriage, you're going to have to take the bad with the good. All right? So remember, not a one-night stand, it's a marriage. And you have to get your partners lined up. And it takes a long time before you get your partners lined up. But it's worth the effort. Because if you're just coming in with an ask of one thing and you're going to the minister, that's not very unlikely that that's going to fly. But if you spend the time, you've got to know the minister, you've got to know the parliamentary secretary, really important person to know. You've got to know the senior bureaucrats. And you've become part of their network that they can call on you when they need help, and you can call on them when you need help. This building of these networks and sustaining the network over time is so important. Because at some point in time, when you've got that solid network, a window will open. You can fly through that window, or a door will open. You can walk through that door. But sometimes you're just going to have to the purpose of the advocacy is not to walk through the door, it's to maintain the network. And that's where organizations come in. So organizations, the CMA, the Royal College, all these organizations that we have to help get the physician voice out. Okay? Those organizations are there in order to keep that network in place and to ensure that there is that ongoing engagement of the decision makers. Which brings me to another issue that as an individual physician, if you want to engage a policymaker, you have to be able to influence your organization. All right, because organizations make choices about what things that they're going to focus on and influence in terms of policy. So that at our physician level, if we join an organization, do we take a role in it on the executive? Are we the guy in the back room always criticizing them for not doing something, but not taking the step to actually join the decision-making group? So there are all these nuances, but important nuances in how this process occurs.
Thank you. So some of what I'm hearing is the importance of creating networks and sort of allying yourself with like-minded people or organizations to amplify that message for your advocacy. And in many ways, I think through this Wellness Matters series of sessions, as well as our Okanagan work and the other CAMI initiatives, we're trying to create that community of people who have physician well-being and health as a key focus. So thank you. Next, we're going to open it up to our question and answer period. So I'm just going to share a slide just to remind people how to participate. Just bear with me. And let me just switch the view. All right. So we do have a question and answer box. So you can submit a question through that and we'll see what you type. The other option is you can raise your hand through the raise hand feature, and then we'll unmute you and you can ask your question live. There's also the opportunity if you want to share sort of your thoughts or experiences. And again, we want to focus on a safe, positive, proactive environment. And every question or comment helps strengthen our learning today and makes things more interactive. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please jump in. Jennifer Turcott-Rusak.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone, for this wonderful presentation today. There are a number of us on the call that are not physicians, but we're in positions at a medical school that we provide health and wellness support to residents and undergraduate medical students. And how I just and as a nurse myself too, I'm just curious about your thoughts on how, as we as partners and allies, that we can support our medical learners in our institutions in regards to into supporting their wellness and how and what they identify wellness and any strategies that you might have come across that this is a big question that you might have come across that have been effective at other institutions. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and see if the senator would like to add, because I did go through burnout when I was in residency and had a very unpleasant experience with that. We talk a lot when we think about things like burnout and wellness about the individual aspects of it, and I do think that's really important. So I want to see medical schools, provincial and territorial medical associations having those resources on hand for someone who's already experiencing burnout, who has some sort of mental health need. So having counseling services, support services, I think those are all really critical. But I also always want to be cautious that we're not blaming the individuals when it's really environmental changes that need to happen. I really liked when the senator talked about how they started off talking about workplace and then kind of came around to wellness. And now we're sort of coming back around to realizing that the workplace does have a massive impact on wellness. And so maybe that's where we should be talking again. And so I think when it comes to learners, there's this tendency of all of us to see what we went through and feel like, well, if we went through it, then they should. And, every generation looks at the generation after them and sees them as not contributing as much, as wanting things easier. But I also see that as a real strength that the incoming group is saying, we want physicians to have better work-life balance. We want them to put their health as a priority as well as everybody else's health. And so putting in policies that make sure that there are protected days for learners to learn, protected days for them to do everything else that's required in life, making sure that they do have opportunities to sleep. Somebody still needs to be here to care for people in the middle of the night. Currently at Women's Hospital, there are babies being born all through the day. Someone does have to be here, but we still can have policies that make sure that people get rest in between some of those shifts and making sure that we're protecting people the best we can while we're providing that care that happens at all hours. And so I think it's really important when we look at contracts with resident groups, when we look at policies in universities, that we do have that future generations' wellness in mind. And in particular, I think about also including accessibility needs in those policies, because there's an awful lot of people who have visible and invisible, disclosed and undisclosed disabilities. And when we have this huge physician shortage across the country, we need all of us participating to our full level. And that means making sure that people are physically and mentally able to do so. And so that's where those protections can be particularly effective in keeping people in the workplace. Because I left my residency and because I couldn't continue to do that work, it wasn't somewhere that I could mentally continue to participate and stay well. And while I'm very glad, because I love public health and I'm excited to be back in public health in this new role, I don't want other residents who maybe would have thrived at a surgical specialty to leave because they haven't been able to find a path where they are supported to do that work in a healthy way for them.
Words of wisdom. When I think about this from the problem or issue perspective, I think about what are the characteristics of the person? What are the characteristics of the environment? And what are the characteristics of the community of support? And then I try to understand, in your organization, I assume your organization thinks of it similarly. What are the personal attributes and personal responsibilities? What is the environment? And that includes what are the demands of the environment, because the person and the environment. And then there has to be a fit there. And sometimes the person has made the wrong choice given their personal characteristics and the environment they have chosen to go to. And so that doesn't mean that the environment has to change to support everything that the person wants. Maybe that's the issue, and you have to figure that out. But it may be that a group of persons, we're going to Jeremy Bentham, good for the greatest number now, is not being supported by the environment, and the environment has to change. So there's this complicated dance between the needs of the individual, the expectations, and the necessity of the environment. So can we change the environment to meet the demands of every single individual? Probably not. All right? Not all individuals fit into the same kind of environment. That's just the reality. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a medical program or a legal program or whatever you're doing, and you're in parliament. The environment and the person have to be a good fit. So I would start with wondering what's the process of fit. That being said, better environments are better for everybody. So the way I used to approach all this is that I don't know if you're going to be a good fit for this environment, but I know if this environment sucks, most people aren't going to be a good fit for it. So let's make the environment as good as we can be, but realizing that not every single person is going to fit in that environment. So our goal, our role here is to try to do that. And the way we do that is to do a couple of things. One is that we provide support for the person, but our support for the person isn't determined by what their wants are. Our support of the person is determined by what their needs are in relationship to what the needs of the environment are. And our community that we develop, the community of support, is what runs across both pieces. So the community support has to link the person to the environment, but it also has to come with the realization that not every demand by the individual can be met by the environment, just as not every demand of the environment is supposed to be met by the individual. So there's no answer to your question. I don't think. There's only the realization that this is the dance that we're in. And we can sometimes err on the side of the environment. Everyone's got to fit this environment. No, that's not true. This is the only way that we can do this. No. I mean, that's the stuff I had to deal with when we did the strike. You know, everybody has to go and call 112 or else suck it up, buttercup. No, that's not good. Okay, that might have been fine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, but it's not fine now. That has to change. So we change the environment. Okay, but also, and I'm going to say something, and this is medicine, and I'm just saying now this as having been an associate dean, medicine is not for every single person that thinks they want to be a doctor. Let's just be honest about that, okay? So what are the needs of the person, and are they different than the wants of the person? What are the needs of the environment, and how can the environment be supportive to almost everybody? So that's the challenge that we have. There's no simple answer to your question. I wish I had a simple answer. I don't have a simple answer.
I just want to echo one thing just from my own experience, because even if they had tried to support me in obstetrics and gynecology, I was not a good fit for there, because I learned that my mental health is very dependent on sleep. And you just can't do obstetrics if you are very dependent on sleep. So I completely agree. If they would have really tried, I probably would have stuck it out longer and still ended up needing to leave. So I completely agree with the fit. But I also see at the same time that the way we structure medicine was designed with a very different way that we structured society, where most physicians were white, male, able-bodied physicians who had a stay-at-home partner who took care of everything else in their life. And that is not true for most physicians anymore. Most don't have a stay-at-home partner. It's like, I think 30% of male physicians and about 8% of female physicians have a stay-at-home partner. Most are not white, male, able-bodied. And so we do need to do both, as Senator was saying, is look at where the environment can be improved for the sake of everyone, but also I was never going to be a good fit to do obstetrics. While I'm still at Women's Hospital, I found a way. I'm a hospitalist now, so I do shifts and I can come in and I have control over how many hours I work, how many shifts I do. And so I can still contribute in this environment, even if the right fit wasn't for me to be the surgeon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. And I think part of that is creating systems where there's that support up front to help our learners sort of reflect and discover who they are and what sort of environment they require, and obviously the rest of the system trying to make it as healthy and health promoting as we can. We just have a few more minutes left, but there's a good question in the question and answer, so I'd like to get to that. So we'll keep the answers very brief if we could. So Dr. Kathy Chervin says, as physicians, we belong to a privileged and wealthy section of society. Ultimately, I believe that advocating for our own health better serves society, but I think sometimes the public doesn't see that. How do we advocate for ourselves, our patients, and the system while acknowledging our privilege? Thanks.
Well, thanks. I've always known Katya to have simple questions. Yes, we are. And I think the public has, from my experience, and I don't know the surveys, maybe Joss will know better. The public has a mixed view of us. And you're starting to see what happens when our view is diminished in the eyes of legitimate authorities. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the new appointee for the Surgeon General in the United States, okay? These are people who diminish the value of a physician. But they're getting an awful lot of support from the public. So I'm going to say this. I'm sorry if I take a bit of time, but I want to put this in the context that I understand it, as I see it, is that, yes, we are seen as, we are socially sanctioned healers, but we're not the only ones. We have an expertise that we think is really important. It's scientific, it's the scientific purpose, the scientific medical approach. We have the science, we have the physician, and we have the patient, and that's what evidence-based medicine is about. had the privilege to study under David Sackett. So, but the public doesn't see that. They also see us as fat cats. And let me be really blunt, and if you don't like this, well, I'm not here to make you like me. When we argue that our salaries of $550,000 a year should be increased, and the person is sitting there on a $30,000 a year income and having to go to food banks, and someone comes and says that physician doesn't know what they're talking about, you're going to be healthy if you just do this, we lose our credibility. So we have to be very, very careful about how we bring forward what is the physician. We can't lose the socially sanctioned healer part, because that's what we are. But we have to understand that the social contract that we have with the public, as opposed to the social contract with our physician, with our patient, but the social contract we have with the public is complicated. It's nuanced. And the fact that we're seeing this huge wave of populist-driven anti-expertise component is part of the other side of this coin. So the question that I would raise is, how are we going to deal with that? How can we maintain the expertise that we bring to our profession with a public that is increasingly skeptical of expertise? And arguing about salaries is not the way to do it.
I would have like 2 sentences just to add that I think what at the CMA we've tried to do, and we have the advantage that we don't negotiate salaries, is try to focus on if there's people are struggling with access to care, the improvements that we make to the workplace for physicians will improve access to care. And that's really been a focus for us, because when physicians have less paperwork that they need to do, they potentially have more time, or they stick around in the workplace longer. They don't retire, they don't cut their hours. And so that has really been a focus for us, is to look at it as how do we improve the system? And part of how we improve the system is by making us more efficient and healthier as providers.
Good point.
Thank you. Great answer, everyone. So I'm just going to share, we're at the end of our time, so I'm just going to find the slide. So just thank you everyone for joining us today. Our next webinar will be hybrid, so it'll be live streamed from ICAM, so the International Conference on Academic Medicine, which is a fantastic conference. It's in Ottawa this year, so you can look into it. We will be doing it live and then also hybrid, so please attend. In addition, please scan this QR code and complete the session evaluation. It helps us improve, and you can suggest topics for future sessions. And again, I'd like to thank both of our fantastic speakers today. Thank you so much for taking this time out of your schedule and for sharing your knowledge with us. It was a fantastic session. I wish we had more time to keep chatting.
Thank you for the excellent moderation.
Yeah, superb.
And thank you,
Josh. I'm going to twist your arm about AMR.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Take care, everyone.